You.
Well,
So Martha is here, Miguel is here, and Fonna and Teddy is here. First, I want to give a little introduction.
can you hang on 1 second? I had my notebook. I might have left it over there. Just 1 second.
Where is it? Be waiting. Okay. Yeah. This is your office. Wow.
It is.
Yes.
With years, the stack of things in his desk has increased.
I know.
It just goes up.
When I met him, the stack was very small. Now it's just like 2 or 3.
I just want to start. Martha, with Martha, we doing this seminars, which is the organization. It's a little bit difficult. I thought it would be very easy, but intercontinental seminars, and the title is Autonomous Infrastructure. It has 2 sides. This title, one, it's very metaphorical. Also, I mean, in my opinion, there is no way maybe to construct autonomous infrastructure. And what does it mean is it free from government? Is it free from any state? Is it free from any dependency? This is a kind of a metaphorical question about infrastructure. And secondly, we thought it's important to focus on the question and discourse of infrastructure that is in different scale, from very small scale to larger urban territorial scale. Or I think infrastructure discussion needs a new angle, new contemporary approach, because what is going on in different cities, in different territories, has some similarities in discussion, also has a different kind of contextual frame, from border to war zone to gentrification to urban big transformation, state-led transformation. So it is a different kind of context and angle, and different kind of various kind of scale. But I think the political question remains the same, or the question of autonomy question can be asked in different. I mean, this question can be structured in this different kind of level with the same approach. This is why this is a kind of a brainstorming meeting with people and discussing minimum an hour. I know it's not enough. We can discuss and go along presentation for long, but we hope that this is a kind of a coming together and kind of brainstorming and sharing our ideas. We invited Miguel Robles-Durán and Teddy and Fonna for this. I thought in the beginning we thought that Miguel and Teddy and Fonna, they know each other, and also they are related with their project. And myself, I remember we crossed the San Diego border to Tijuana years ago by walking together. I remember this performance, and then how we entered US from a legal checkpoint. The activities you are doing in the borderline, also in the cities, in the neighborhoods, I think that's all relate the question of what we can call civic infrastructure nowadays. I think there are many things to discuss. With Martha, we have this. We don't have those strict structures for the seminars, and but is this? I consider this seminar is more question based. Like, is this civic infrastructure that really exists? What is the negotiation behind? And sometimes nowadays, myself, I'm asking: does neighborhood, scale and this social spatial structure, does it really exist? Can we still speak about neighborhoods? This is one thing, and then the other thing is the actors and administrative level, how to negotiate and debate with them. This is also another kind of question. I'm curious. I think we can start, if Marta agrees, we start with Teddy and Fonna. Is it okay, Marta?
Of course.
And then move to Miguel, and we propose that like a few minutes you can talk about currently what you're involved in, and we had in our mind Teddy's Fonna's recent deal project. I think you have a meeting also today, isn't it?
Yes.
About civic infrastructure.
Yeah. So I was thinking this is a big coincidence too to discuss. Of course, here is more in your case. Maybe I assume is more the actors, administrative actors, people. I mean, I'm so curious how to deal. Is also an important issue in Turkey too, how to negotiate with the political bodies, and where is the politics lie behind, what is the positioning lying behind those negotiations. And I know Miguel last year, he firstly, currently Miguel and Marta are running conferences, forums, together discussion forums. And also Miguel, I know recently with his team, he has done a kind of research project in the Philadelphia Action Research. So maybe it's interesting also to discuss what is in a research and in the framework of a research knowledge production. What is action research, and what was your experience? Is it easy? What is the outcome? What is the process? Especially, we can focus on Philadelphia. I know you have many other involvement, but this is also could be enough only to focus on that. So we start with Teddy. Fonna, maybe you can a little bit tell. Yeah.
Yes. Let's just begin with maybe some broad expectations from our part. I would maybe open up with broad issues, and maybe Fonna can focus on a couple of specific details, maybe.
Yeah.
But just to begin a bit with a provocation, I think that, and obviously Fonna and I didn't prepare for this issue of autonomy necessarily.
There is no need for preparation, actually.
Yeah. So one first thing is, and speaking personally, also as a partnership with Fonna, I've really been against the notion of autonomy for a moment, if I can say it broadly, and give me a space to really elaborate. On one hand, I think a lot of the work that we've been developing in the last years has really tried to problematize the role of architecture less as a top-down model that imposes what has been understood as an autonomous project. By that I mean architecture that remains self-referential, really constituted around its own structures of assembly, language, technology, and so on. In other words, yes, architecture as an object that has not been understood in relationship to the larger domains, let's call it for a moment social, political, economic, primarily in the context of inequality today, architecture in relationship to bottom-up dynamics in the city, and so on. So yes, for a moment I've been a critic of architecture as understood as an autonomous field. Mm-hmm. In similar ways, if we talk about autonomy from the bottom up, because that's what maybe you are getting at, yes, we are at a moment where we are trying to seek autonomy for many of our communities that really can enable new strategies of survival, of sustainability, and so on, by localizing modes of production, economies, even forms of governance, and so on. But also I'm critical of that because I am a bit afraid that by perpetuating yet another bubble in the context of many bubbles of in this archipelago of fragmented institutions and communities, we are not going to get that far. I mean, I know that levels of autonomy for community-based practices is important, but more than ever today, I think we need to also make government accountable for its responsibility to connect that level of autonomy and survivability with resources, with knowledges. And so I think that we are trying to figure out a more complicated relational project that links government and community, institutions and publics, at a time when, and we know it, I mean, at a time when in the political spectrum, the radical left and the radical right have united forces in their disbelief of governance and of institutions. So I think that we are interested in trying to figure out how to, instead of speaking of autonomy, how to push a project that reconstitutes a robust idea of public thinking and public and civic agendas and priorities. Following that very quickly, yes, that emerges in terms of our own desires as practitioners and academics, as a desire to really open up the institutional memory that we have lost. Because even in the United States, there was such a period as the New Deal, there was such a period as a historical moment in this country where at least the institutions synergized in their belief and their investment in public infrastructure and public priorities. Obviously, that top-down public project will not come back anytime soon, and that's the reason we are trying to figure out how do we, where do we find the public today? And we, as many others like you, we have found it in the marginalized communities across the border, which have invented new formulations about how to produce their own economies, their own spaces, their own infrastructures, even if it is at a very local and small scale. So just to say something about this, we're interested then in border territories as laboratories for rethinking civic imagination. Because if we are able to produce a project here at the border where, how would I say it, an individual in Tijuana or in San Diego can come to terms with the common interests, the shared values that unite them, or at least that connect them regardless of the political border, that there are shared values, whether through the environmental systems and through the socio-economic flows that traverse the border, we might begin to speak of the public differently, a cross-border public, a cross-border citizen whose idea of citizenship is less dominated by the imposition of the nation state or the identitarian politics of communitarian dynamics, but is really about a more collective aspiration, let's say, for common values. Finally, our project, when it comes to the question of civic infrastructure, yes, at a moment when we would like governments to really be more committed to public spending, we have realized that from the United States to Europe, austerity measures have completely made it clear that the longevity of this social welfare state, does not exist, and that we need to again rethink modes of intervention. So even though we wish that there was a more robust public institution investing in a more robust public infrastructural project, we cannot find it in the US today nor in Europe, and that's the reason our research has focused on Latin America, where we have witnessed in cities like Medellin or Bogota the resurgence of a more progressive idea of government, who in collaboration with communities, with the bottom-up, have begun to reinvent what infrastructure means at the scale of neighborhoods, which connects beautifully with a lot of our research here at the border, where we have declared neighborhoods as the laboratories for rethinking housing, public space, and civic infrastructure. Those are general issues, and maybe Fonna can speak a couple of, elaborate on a couple of ideas.
Well, I'm glad Teddy framed it that way actually initially about the autonomous aspirations And our attempt really to serve as a kind of, we see our practice serving as a kind of role of mediation between those two zones, the top down and the bottom up. And so we are trying very hard to figure out strategies for translating knowledges in both directions. And for us, we have had a lot of agility to do that kind of work from the base of the university. We've also done it from inside the city. For a short time, we were running a lab inside of the mayor's office, actually modeled on some of the experiments that have been inspiring to us from Latin America, Bogota, Medellin, and other places. So we've done it inside the city, we're doing it inside of the university. We really see ourselves as trying to figure out how to create corridors of knowledge that otherwise remain very siloed, very particular to language, cultural sort of norms, and so forth, how to break those down and create flow. So our practice is primarily based within the university. There are many challenges to working inside of the university because working in marginalized neighborhoods in our region, working on the border, is often seen by academics as charitable, as humanitarian. The university tends to see this kind of work as basically the university with all of the knowledge and the community with none, receiving us and opening themselves as if they need us in order to fulfill their aspirations and so forth. And we've really been trying to intervene inside of university culture to help people here understand that the community is as much a partner to us as we are to them. So we very much need them to understand how it is that communities work, how it is that informal development happens. And so we've been tipping that model from a vertical one to a horizontal one, to a model of partnership, arguing that universities and communities can be meaningful partners in the fight against inequality and other stressors on underserved communities today. So we have a practice here at the university called the Cross-Border Initiative, where we run student internships, circulating students into the field. We have another project called the Community Stations Project, where we are actually investing in developing university-based hubs in neighborhoods throughout the region. We have 2 of them on the San Diego side, 1 in Tijuana, where we are working with our community partners to develop knowledge together. Brand new sort of model of scholarship where the public scholar and the university scholar are working together to produce new knowledge and circulating students in that process as well. So we can say more about the actual community stations, but it's a combination of university community programming as well as infrastructural intervention, where the university's resources become leveraged for communities to become stewards of their own housing, their own community spaces, their own public spaces. So we're really trying, to mobilize the resources we have at the university to empower agency within communities that's already there. I mean, let's face it, it's already there. Often it's latent. Communities. My own work is I direct a center here on global development all over the world. And one thing that I've noticed again and again wherever I work is that communities oftentimes naturalize their own inequality. They naturalize their own deprivation. They lose a sense of the horizon of possibility that can actually exist. And so we are committed to figuring out how to break away those sort of barriers, those ceilings, and to activate the capacity an agency that's latent oftentimes in these communities. So there are a lot of projects, and we could talk more about projects, but maybe we should stop there for a bit.
If I can just quickly, and then Miguel can enter, but just to elaborate on, and sorry, I was maybe yelling in the beginning, because I have the computer, I didn't know, I didn't know where the microphone is, and I wanted to make sure you were hearing. But anyway, important issue here is to open up the question of mediation. Who facilitates, who is the interlocutor of this new relationship possibly between top-down resources and the creative intelligence of the bottom-up. A lot of our work on the informal has focused on the translation of the socio-economic and political procedures embedded in informality, and therefore we've spoken a lot about how the informal for us is less an aesthetic category and more a praxis. We're interested in the translation of the procedures that are invisible to the institutions in order to push the institutions to transform public policy. And it is in that journey from the bottom up to the top down and back where we would have to reinvent infrastructure. Again, infrastructure less as a domineering top-down project that is autonomous, but infrastructure that simply enables, obviously, the adaptability and the flexibility that is needed at the scale of communities. So when Fonna spoke about our community stations project, is to know, just like Miguel and others, and many of us who have been touched by the amazing legacy of Medellin, is to understand that public space is a space of education, and that social justice is not just about redistributing resources, but it must be about redistributing knowledges. Again, circulating from the bottom up to the top down and back, and I think that a lot of detail we could give you about the nature of these projects, but those are maybe broadly speaking the conceptual material that has inspired us. How to intervene in a new form of organ pedagogy first, and for that I'm going to finish just with one thought, which is another project we've been advancing in the context of Latin America. It's a collaboration with Antanas Mocruz, the former mayor of Bogota, who is the one, he becoming a mythical mayor of Bogota, who sent a provocation to all of us years ago, when he said, before transforming the city physically, before transforming the city with infrastructure, we first need to transform social norms and behaviors, mutual trust. We need to nurture a new sensibility, which he ended up calling a citizenship culture. And that involves a new form of pedagogy at the scale of the public, because it doesn't matter how much our discourse advances if we don't change the hearts and minds of the public at large that has perpetuated the mythologies that have become so harmful for the development of the city. Let's call it the American dream, that has perpetuated the right to be left alone without any care for a collective well-being. I think that we cannot advance the culture that much. So I think that our project is in this linkage between university and communities and these forms of knowledge exchange, framed by a smarter infrastructure at the local scale, is what we are super interested in advancing.
Mm-hmm. I think, there are many things that describe the question.
You know what? We're having trouble hearing you.
Oh,
yes.
There
we go.
Yeah, you're
yes.
Yeah. I think, there is a few things very important. One, the autonomy can be, maybe we can discuss later conceptually, it can be replaced to interdependency. That most of the public-based activists, Spanish activists, they use, instead of autonomy, they use interdependency, and some urban activists there. So is a interdependency, knowledge, infrastructure, alternative economical structures that you share together, and this interdependency, this collectivity creates an autonomous structure. So they prefer not to use autonomy, but interdependency that last in the discussion we had. So it's also what Teddy and Fonna are describing more is or Teddy started with this provocative question. I think he wants to go more to the term from autonomy to interdependency, how institutions are depending each other in a mutual knowledge and practice-based structures, infrastructures. One important another thing is the role of the architect that as a institutional department practice university also as a person that Teddy and Fonna is coming back continuously. What is the role of the and I think also I liked very much the university pedagogy involvement that Fonna, yeah, is right, is always is like the departments, urban planning or architecture or sociology also. I'm coming from a sociology background, but it's always like you go to the neighborhood and you do your research and come back. And it's somewhere there. And of course, in Turkey, the scholars are bottom-up more involved now. It is not like 10, 15 years ago. But it still is important to understand we scholars, researchers, we don't go to necessarily to help them. It's also we involved and we learn from them too. So it's a kind of partnership and collective, further a collective knowledge production. But it needs time for institutions like universities, I think, to understand that. There are many things to pick up. Martha, do you want to say something, ask something now, or should we move to Miguel? Or do you have something urgent you want to also say?
No, I just finding this discussion very interesting. Of course, I am interested to see that what you seem to be saying about the Spanish is that they are essentially rejecting the idea of autonomy. You can't just replace autonomy with interdependency without acknowledging that you are completely going back to what Teddy and Fonna were talking about, which is to reject the concept of an autonomous entity. We understand where the term comes from and what it means, but in fact, once you start talking about, well, two possibilities. One is obviously the Spanish may be talking about a horizontalism in itself, that it's the members who are interdependent and there are various internal structures that require connections. But what Teddy and Fonna were talking about, of course, was something entirely different, which is a return to the idea that government has to be involved in a way that is not simply unresponsive to demands from below, but sees it as an integral part of the planning process once again. So I'd just like to say that these are quite different ways of dealing with the notion that has come up.
Yeah, that's very good.
Thanks.
Just picking up on one thing you said at the end, Martha, I mean, one of our big frustrations has been the way planning in municipalities claims to be engaging the bottom up, claims to be engaging communities. So in our city, for example, there's a community planning process of these committees that are set up in neighborhoods, and they tend to be dominated by the same people. They don't really drill down into demographics that have been marginalized from the political process at all. But the government comes in, the municipality comes in, they check a box, they've done their community engagement, and on they go. It's been a big frustration.
This is, of course, a common method of control, you know, the creation of essentially sham structures that are hollow because they don't, in fact, represent real input. They represent a kind of venting or a kind of aspirational relationship.
I just, I'm curious about I found it always difficult with working and with the...
Your voice, your audio is messing up again.
Oh, now, you hear me now? I mean,
it's moderately better.
Okay, 1 second. I have someone. It is difficult to work with here municipality, Fonna? What is the planning department of a municipality? What is the exact?
You still have a feedback echo. It's not better.
Ah, okay.
No.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you with an echo.
With an echo.
And I hear myself with an even longer echo.
Yeah, we hear ourselves as well.
Okay.
Slightly. Yeah.
I just want. Oh, I hear you. I don't. Anyway, it's difficult to collaborate. I mean, I find with the government, municipalities. Also, in some of my research, what I saw in a long process, how it changes in time with the municipality and yeah, let's say the municipality, because as there are different departments, there are governors too who can which is another body that can intervene in such collaboration. How do you see the process, Fonna, with municipality, the project you start, and how it goes with the process of negotiating and working together with the municipality. In Turkey, this is why I'm curious to ask, because people change, the politics, and then the other day comes, what you do in the project is cut or something. So there is not so much sustainability. So this is why I never trust the governmental body in such projects. So I wonder how you deal with is it different in different cities, in Bogota or San Diego? How you are flexible on that? How do you negotiate in the process?
Is something. Yeah. I mean, you know, obviously we are inspired by cities who have successfully tackled that challenge, and it's very hard to recreate the conditions in another place. And so you take bits and pieces and you try to assemble something. The cities that are most inspiring to us, and Miguel as well, I mean, Medellin, Colombia, the municipalities that really affected all of the dramatic change in that city were able to do what they did at a time of intense crisis, a moment of intense crisis in the city. But it was the way, very, charismatic leaders were able to summon people across sectors to begin thinking creatively together, to break down silos and so forth. And we tried to recreate that, something like that, in our own city, because we had a mayor who was willing to give us the space to do that. One thing we've learned is that it's easier to assemble a kind of agile, creative momentum in a city if it's done inside the mayor's office. Because as soon as you get entangled in the bureaucracy of departments and divisions and their protocols, things get stuck. Mm-hmm. So we were inside the mayor's office, we had the agility, but what we learned very quickly is as soon as that mayor was replaced, and it happened unfortunately very quickly, to a new administration, the new administration had new priorities. We were moved out of the mayor's office, we were put in the planning department, and everything got stuck. It didn't work in the planning department. So what we've learned is how fragile it is to do these things inside the municipality. We've been more successful actually doing it outside the municipality and working with agents inside the city who are receptive to this kind of work. So knowing how to push on certain buttons when we need to, and bringing the municipality in very particular ways when we need them. But the municipality oftentimes is not the right institution to actually lead this kind of work. The mediators and interlocutors on the outside are the people who then summon the government, summon the private sector even, summon other institutions as they're needed for a particular project or a particular intervention.
Right, and it is important to say that obviously that depends on the context. So it cannot be obviously totalizing, because in fact in Medellin and Bogota it worked from the municipality, right? So the kind of urgency of a new political leadership that prioritizes inequality and that prioritizes public investment. But conceptually, somehow, what is important to discuss here is that the project then becomes an institutional project. How do we reconceive, how do we reorganize the protocols embedded in bureaucracy? The tragedy in the United States, as in many countries, in cities and like Istanbul or Ecuador, where Quito, where Miguel was working, is the backwardness and the Byzantine backwardness of the bureaucratic project. It's almost as if there is one fertile ground to intervene into, is bureaucracy itself, creatively. And that's where artists and all of us would have to be as new agents to really enable that, because I teach in a visual arts department and my students hate government, hate bureaucracy, hate the kinds of, and so I think that is the project, in fact, that Sergio Fajardo, the former mayor of Medellin, declared to be the first site of intervention. We are going to rethink governance and make it more transparent, more efficient, more collaborative with communities. And he transformed his office literally into an urban think tank, where he brought social workers, architects, the research of universities, grassroots organizations, civic philanthropy to tackle head-on the projects of concern. And finally, I think that it becomes then an institutional project, but also a way of intervening into a new idea of the political, if I can call it that. I think simply still reflecting on what happened in Medellin is that, as this former mayor once told us, this is not an architectural project to begin with. This is not an artistic project to begin with. This is a political project. And that meant prioritizing inequality. He declared that the root of violence in Medellin, which was the most dangerous city in the world, was inequality, in that all institutions were responsible to tackle it together. That this couldn't happen just from the vantage point of one sector or an autonomous kind of project. Or yes, in places like ours in San Diego or other places where that does not exist, that kind of leadership and that progressive thinking does not exist. Sometimes we have to begin small, and that's the reason we then reoriented ourselves to the neighborhoods, to the border, to the nonprofits we work with, because maybe we can begin to build small gestures and traces that can, by their intelligence, let's hope, begin to trickle upwards to someday re-engage the public at that scale, at the scale that we saw in Medellin.
Marta, do you agree?
Let's hear from Miguel.
Yeah. Let's move.
Hi. Been listening very carefully.
Yeah, Miguel thinking about the Ecuador process. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. I mean, do I sound okay to all of you? I hear myself a little bit of an echo.
Very clear.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, what to add? Teddy and Fonna just put together very eloquently. I would like to start the question forward was the and recently
You know what? When they're coming out, the audio is not good.
It's choppy.
It's choppy.
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's just when you continue talking because it just goes in and out. But now it's great.
Are you close to the microphone?
Yeah, no, I doubt it. But
I don't think it's related to the microphone. I think it's the transmission.
okay, so it might be better here.
I need an internet connector. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm closer. I can get to more.
Just the same.
All right.
This is absolutely terrible. It's better?
Yeah.
The sound is better, but the video quality is
It's fading. Okay. So let's just give a little time to pick up on the speed. Okay, so I want the question. Does it sound?
Miguel, sorry, it's
Hello?
really bad. It's bad.
We're hearing nothing.
Yeah, there is an echo going on. But it looks good now.
What if we all disconnected and started again? I mean, what if we basically reset the connection?
Okay.
Should we?
I have my phone. Maybe I'm still terrible.
Miguel, can do that. Maybe you can.
Yes, I'm here.
You know, we are connected to a wire, but I don't know how your Wi-Fi wireless connection is over there.
Yeah, I have the highest speed available in New York, but of course it's time Warner, so right.
I'm
So
connected also.
You are connected to a wire, Martha?
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's the reason it works better, no?
No, it's
Oh,
not.
wireless.
The wireless is probably the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's getting better now. Oh no.
It's not improving.
No.
Okay, so shall we hang up and connect
I
again?
think Fonna might be right. Maybe we should restart, assuming
Okay.
we can get back on by pressing the same link. Helen?
Yes, shall I go stop? We go, or only Miguel is going off, or all together. I don't know. I didn't
You
understand.
all sound pretty bad to me.
Yes,
It's a real-
Spelling you sound terrible, and Marta also sounds with a lot of echo.
Okay.
Okay, so let's reconnect.
Okay, we'll log out.
So we stop and continue. Okay. We go off now. Okay. Huh?
Turn it off.
Yeah, just click it.